Morning, brothers and sisters. I'm very happy to see you. And, even though I was there when Mother was in the DC and New York, but just remind myself who is Mother. And as she said, we are so blessed. And I personally really want to be a prayer daughter. Like this morning, I just a few seconds ago pressed myself. I really put that having parents, parents. Thank you so much for inviting us here. Nice to meet you.
Okay, we're reading this morning from the book of Matthew. This is chapter 14, verse 22 to 33. And straightway Jesus constrained his disciples to get into a ship and to go before him unto the other side, while he sent the multitudes away. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up into a mountain apart to pray. And when the evening was come, he was there alone. But the ship was now in the midst of the sea, tossed with waves, for the wind was contrary. And in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went unto them, walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, It is a spirit. And they cried out for fear. But straightway Jesus spake unto them, saying, Be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it be thou, bid me come unto thee on the water. And he said, Come. And when Peter was come down out of the ship, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw the wind boisterous, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried, saying, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus stretched forth his hand and caught him and said unto him, O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt? And when they were come into the ship, the wind ceased. Then they that were in the ship came and worshipped him, saying, Of a truth, thou art the Son of God.
Good morning, everybody. I would like to share with you a few thoughts today about faith, and in particular, the faith that conquers fear. Faith is a very important and challenging subject for me to preach on, because I would say that over the last 40 years, I've often been challenged to have faith and keep faith in a time of difficulty. You know, it's easy to be faithful when things are going well and everything is according to plan. But that's not really faith. Faith is when things are not going well, and somehow you have a vision of where God is going to take you, and it allows you to do extraordinary things. So the passage we've just read, I think, needs some illustration to really get, kind of the sense of this experience. So, of course, the story of Jesus walking on the water is a very well-known story in the Bible. It actually appears in all of the Gospels. So it's something, whatever happened, really made a powerful impact on people. And I myself only recently realized that that day had already been a very long day. It was the day of the feeding of the 5,000. And according to the scriptures, Jesus went out early in the morning to get away from people and to spend some time in prayer. But they saw him leaving, and they followed him, and he was with them all day. So I want you to have that experience. So, Sharon was telling me that here in North Carolina, you don't like short sermons. And I should plan to preach at least till past kickoff time at 3 o'clock. Because then you'll feel the hunger and the pain that these disciples were feeling that day, that they've been in church for hours and hours and hours, and there's no lunch. But that's another sermon, actually, because, the story went that Jesus did feed them, and then he went away to really get away, to pray, and he sent his disciples on ahead of him in a boat back home to Capernaum. According to the historians, Jesus and his disciples had a home. They had a base in Capernaum. It's a little town on the edge of the Sea of Galilee. And so he sent them on ahead while he went to pray. And the action, as it was, takes place in the middle of the lake. Now, some of you here may actually have been on the Sea of Galilee, because there was a time Klaus has, and Caroline has, and Karen has, and yeah, a few of you, right? Is it a big lake? It's quite big, right? You can see the shore, but it's fairly large, and it actually does sometimes have violent storms. But most of you here have not been on the Sea of Galilee in a storm. So we're going to recreate it here to kind of get the juices flowing. So I'd like anyone who's under, let's see, Jesus' disciples were all under 30 years old, right? So except Peter was a bit older? Okay. So anyone whose name is Peter and anyone else who's 30 years old, we need some disciples on the boat here. This is going to be the boat, okay? So if we could have Jake and Carson to kind of get things going here, you can be my disciples on the boat. And who else is going to be? Yes, if you're under 30, please come up here and be on the boat. Come on, guys. Sam and Jackson, get your butts up here, he said. Okay. All right, our disciple team is growing. Here they are. Have we got 12 yet? Not yet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You, sir. Who else would like to come? How about our musician, bass guitarist? Yeah, come on up there. Are we up to 12 now? We only need 11 actually. 3, 6, 9. Over there. 3, 6, 9, 11. Okay, so who else do we have in this story? We need Jesus. Who should we call? Let's call Klaus to be Jesus. A poor representation, I know, but you have to make do with what you've got. Okay, so you're not on the boat, right? You're over here. Okay. Now you guys, you're not out of it either. You are the storm and the wind and the waves. And I want to hear some wild storm noises. But not yet, okay? Just kind of keep it inside. You guys, your job is to simply look terrified, critical, and scared. You think you can do that? Let's give it a try. So they're going to make some storm noises. And you guys are going to look really worried. You can hold on to each other. You can look at each other. Okay, let's give it a go. Let's hear some storm noises. Boom! Come on, that's not much. Come on, more. Okay, guys look terrified. No, you look just excited. Come on, terrified. Boom. Boom. All right. And the ship is sinking. Okay. More storm noises. So here I am. Good. Enough. Breaking the action. Here I am. I'm Peter. I'm the captain. And suddenly, we see Jesus, or this ghost. Can you go back next to, sort of midway down there? We can't really see him because there's a lot of wind and waves. But there's a dude walking on the water towards us. This is not good news, right? We can't really see who it is. And suddenly, I, the captain, says, you know what? If it's you, Jesus, call out to me to come on the water. It is you, so say, come. For you just heard the scriptures, you should know your lines. How do you feel when I, your captain, decide I'm going to go out on the water? So, okay guys, I know it's scary and the boat's sinking, but I'm out of here. I'm going to walk on the water. Do you think that's a good idea? No. What do you think my chances are of success? 0. I'll consult the rest of the church council here. Good idea to walk on the water? No, bad idea, right? More sound and waves, please. More skin. And Peter steps out. It's working, right? But he starts to walk towards Jesus. Meanwhile, on the boat, you guys are kind of muttering to yourself, look at that idiot, we're never going to see him again. Captain doesn't care. The storm is growing. But I'm on the water. And suddenly I start to sink.
You get arthritis, your legs collapse.
That's right. So I have three choices. I'm out here now. I've made this huge leap of faith. I'm in the water, but I'm sinking. So choice one, I can get back on the boat. But look at those guys. They're critical. They're complaining. They're not water walkers. Let's call them boat talkers. They're complaining out there on the boat. I don't really want to get back on that boat. Or I could try to swim or tread water. Kind of, Peter was a swimmer. But how long can you survive in a storm, really, in the middle of the night? Not long. Or I can make that one more step of faith and reach out to Jesus and call on him to save me. And then, of course, that's what Peter did. Lord, save me. And he saves me, and we go back on the boat together. And we're safe. We're safe, guys. You're welcoming Jesus. Like, you don't like me, but here's Jesus. He's kind of taking care of us again. Life is good. Okay, now you can go back to your seat. But you kind of got the picture. So, what on earth is all this about? When I went to seminary, usually when you go to seminary, you learn how all the things in the Bible aren't literally true. Right? That's an unfortunate thing, but for example, for this particular story, there are a lot of schools of thought. What really happened? Some people think it's just a fiction. It never happened. So we can ignore the whole thing. Another school of thought is that actually Jesus wasn't walking on the water at all, but he was walking along the seashore. It's kind of boring, right? But that's what Albert Schweitzer, the great missionary and the healer of lepers, thought. He thought, well, the wind blew them off course, and really there was Jesus out in the surf. There's another school of thinking, German philosophers, that maybe there was a sudden drop in temperature and some ice formed. Okay, far-fetched, right? This is the Middle East, but it does snow there. I've been there when it snowed in Jerusalem. And Jesus was kind of floating on an ice sort of thing. Okay, and another theory is there's like a sandbar going out into the lake. And anyway, I told you that's the kind of nonsense you learn in seminary. But that would only matter if this story is really about Jesus. So, first of all, I thought, okay, this is a story about Jesus, why Jesus is the Messiah, why he has power over the elements, and, he's the savior past the storm. And certainly, you'll hear a lot of sermons where it's about Jesus and about his mighty power. But there's another type of sermon where it's not actually about Jesus at all. It's about Peter. I mean, this is a pretty good moment for Peter, right? We know that later on, Peter blows it big time. He denies Jesus on the night of his crucifixion and is mortified to realize that he couldn't keep his faith to the end. But in this story, Peter is a hero. He's the one, at least, who has enough faith to get out of the boat, out of the safe zone, and start at least walking towards Jesus. And of course, when you go to seminary, you kind of learn the backstory. Well, this gospel was written 60 years after Jesus passed, and it is the gospel for Jews. But it's also the gospel that was written when the church was divided. Because, this is relevant to our church too, but in the years after Jesus, there was a division in the church. I mean, there were two main factions, as it happened. One was the Jewish faction, which was headed up by James, and in particular Peter. And Peter, of course, had lived with Jesus. He knew Jesus. But he always struggled to kind of overcome the Jewish roots of Christianity. And then there was Paul. Paul began as a great persecutor of the Christian faith. But he had a vision of Jesus that transformed his life. And after that, he became the pioneer to the Gentiles. And unless you read the Bible closely, you don't necessarily realize that these guys really hated each other. They did not get on well together. And consequently, the people who followed them also struggled. So, you can imagine the situation in early Christianity with these two significant religious figures, Peter and Paul, or P1 and P2 as they called them in those days. If you want a contemporary example. And who do you follow? Well, Matthew is written from the perspective that it should be P1, or Peter. And this is showing him in his best possible light. But I think this story is actually really about the guys on the stage. Let's give them another round of applause. They're young, terrified sailors. Because, of course, I would like to think of myself as, if I put myself in a story, I'd like to be Jesus, of course, or at least Peter. But would I really be? Or would I really be one of those people on the boat, kind of, afraid, worried, faithless? They weren't so different than Peter, after all. They'd all actually been with Jesus for 2 or 3 years. They'd experienced the same kind of life with him. They were the 12. But when it came down to it, left on their own, they didn't have the courage or the ability to step out in faith. And of course, we don't really know exactly how real this story, but what we do know is that less than a year later, when Jesus was facing crucifixion, the 12 ran away. And in the divine principle and in his sermons, Father said if the 12 had stood together, if they had been united and stood with Jesus, Jesus would not have been crucified. It would have been too much to have him killed. But they didn't stand with him. Not the 12, not the 3. In the end, not even one. And, it's hard to do it, but I think we have to ask ourselves from time to time, well, what about me? How willing am I to stand together with my brothers and sisters to carry forward this work, even though we don't have Jesus in the boat with us? I've often thought that since Father went to the spirit world, we really are a little bit like the disciples in a boat without Jesus. When Jesus was in the boat, things were always pretty good. He only needed to wake up and say, calm the waves, and they'd be calm. And, he was in charge. He was the man. But now they're on their own. And we're on our own a bit, right? We don't have Father with us every day, tell us exactly how things are going to work out. We have to take responsibility ourselves. We do have Mother, but a lot of people are not even sure if Mother can really step into those shoes or not. But the answer actually doesn't depend on her. It depends on us. It depends on to what degree we can do what we need to do, which is what I want to share with you about faith. But before we think about my faith, because that's going to be on our faith, I just want to reflect about 3 other examples of faith which are important to me. And the first is actually God's faith. We don't often think that God has faith, but God does have faith. God has faith that his grand plan of creating his sons and daughters and building the kingdom of God is going to work. It is going to work out, even though it has taken so long. When I kind of question the dependability or faith of God, I like to go outside and look at the night sky. I'm an astronomy buff. And December is a good time to go out and look at the stars. And these days, one of the brightest stars in the sky is Vega. It's actually the 5th brightest star overall. And about 10 o'clock at night, it's right overhead. It's a bluish white star. And it's a star in what's called the main sequence. The main sequence, don't get too technical. But when stars are born, they enter the main sequence when they burn hydrogen into helium. Our sun is a main sequence star, and they last somewhere between 3 and 10 billion years. They just discovered a star in the nearest star to us, Proxima Centauri. It's going to last 4 trillion years. 4 trillion years. However, those stars were not able to serve God's purpose of creation. The ones that God relied on were the ones that exploded. and were destroyed. And you know, when you got something that's fascinating. A star can last billions of years, gradually burning up its nuclear fuel until finally it starts to make iron in its core. And then, within a few seconds, the star collapses on itself and it explodes and makes stardust, and we're all stardust, right? As the song goes. So God waited billions of years knowing that in time the stars would start to explode and they would create planets, and finally he would have the place for his children. And Father has said how much God longed and waited, knowing, visualizing the day when his sons and daughters would live on the earth. And in such a short period of time, we blew it. We could not fulfill our responsibility to create God's family. It was a staggering blow for God after so much waiting. But God did not give up. He immediately, even within Adam and Eve's family, started a plan to save his children. He had faith even when the people he chose, like Noah and Abraham and so many others, fell down at the last moment. God never stopped believing that one day he would find the people who could get it done. And that's why we're still here today. So God had and has undying faith in us. Actually in us personally, but also in humanity. Second, I've always been moved by true father's faith. And again, this is something of a recent realization. I kind of thought that after Father had his life-changing encounter with Jesus, pretty much after that, everything was plain sailing. I foolishly thought, if Jesus showed up to me and said, Mike, you have a special mission from God, and I'm anointing you here to be the chosen one, I'd be good. But actually, it wasn't like that for Father at all. In fact, the more I read, I realize that actually began a period of considerable darkness and challenge. And that actually God did not dictate to Father the divine principle, every day from 9 to 5. How many pages are there in the divine principle anyway? And if you read it, remember? Approximately. 5 million, 5,000, 500, 50. It's about 500 actually. So, again, it's funny how you think about things, right? Okay, 500 pages. So, and it took Father 10 years, he said, to kind of understand the principles. So that's like 50 pages a year. That's like 1 page a week. Well, that's kind of slow going, right? 1 page a week. But I thought, okay, if every Sunday you woke up and you got 1 page of fresh divine principle, maybe you could live on that, right? That would give you power and strength. But actually, Father said, it wasn't anything like that at all. In fact, for almost 8.5 years, he got nothing. It says, I prayed, I fasted, I studied, I got 3 Bibles, English, Korean, Japanese. I scribbled all over them until I could hardly read the words. But many times I realized I was wrong. I didn't understand it. And time and again, doors were closing in my face. For 8 years. And it wasn't until Father finally set back on his way to Korea as a young man of 24. He said that on the boat, it was as if someone had turned on a movie projector and he began to see the providence of God unfolding in front of him like a movie. And for the first time, he understood the secret of the heart of God and of all the saints of history. And whereas in the past, sometimes he bought a diary and it had laid unwritten for months, he needed to get a new one every day because he was getting so much inspiration. After almost 9 years, and Father had faith to keep going. So that moved me because I feel that if we are to follow anybody's example, or even the example of a Messiah, it can't be that life is just easy on the way. That's not how life is. And I'm very encouraged to know that Father also faced his demons and the dark times, and he had faith to overcome them. But one person I didn't really understand and had that kind of faith was True Mother. I didn't know her very well until I became president. Still don't know her extremely well now. But a couple of years ago, we were having tea. Had some nice tea in Oyayama's house last night. I extended my pinky correctly to drink the tea. Anyway, Mother invited a couple of us to have tea at her home in Korea. And we're kind of sitting down on the couch, and she folded her legs up underneath her, kind of like my mom does when she's getting comfortable, and said, "Have you ever thought about what it would be like to be me?" I had to say no. I mean, for one thing, I'm a guy. I never think about what it would be like to be a woman. I don't. And certainly not True Mother, like, no, Mother, you? She said, well, let me tell you, it wasn't always easy. These days, we hear a lot, directly and indirectly, about Mother's testimony about her youth and about the prophecies and inspirations people had about her. And sometimes it seems to be laid on a bit thick, if you know what I mean. Another story, another revelation. But Mother said, have you any idea how irritating it was and how unsettling to have these random prophecies predicted about you, sometimes by complete strangers? She said, my least favorite one, and the one I heard the most often, when people would come up and they would stand in front of me and say, this girl is going to marry somebody at least 25 years older than her. This is when she's a teenager. That doesn't sound too good, right? You're a young woman, and people are telling you with certainty, good news, you're going to marry someone at least 20 years older than you. But there's more. That person will either be a great hero of God, or they'll be the worst criminal the world has ever seen. There's just no way to tell. Wow. Thanks for nothing, right? And this is not just once. This is a regular occurrence of people telling Mother, this is your kind of destiny. That's how it's going to be. But somehow, even though life was not simple for Mother, she kept this belief, God is going to show me the right course. So she married Father. 25 years or 23. And she said in the same kind of talk, can you imagine really what it's like to be married to Father? Now that I could remember, because, Father was really quite intense, right? Some of you have had times and Father liked to speak a long time. My record was about 16 hours. Father started speaking early in the morning. He spoke all day long until into the evening. And this is not just once or twice. Once we had a gathering of the prime ministers and high leaders. We just had a magnificent event in Korea, and we had a celebration banquet. And the banquet was at 12 o'clock, and we all gathered at 11:30, and the Lotte Hotel was on the side, ready with the food. It was just going to be a gorgeous, happy celebration. Nice linen and silver on the table, white cloths. And everyone was really looking forward to a celebration lunch. And somebody made the mistake of asking Father if he wanted to say a few words before lunch. Oh my God. Father wanted to say more than a few words before lunch. In fact, around 5 o'clock, 5 hours later, with the food congealed into a cold slop, the waiters tried to bring in McColl for everyone, at least to have a drink. I always remember the first person to open their McColl can. Oh man, Father, it was like waving a red rag to a bull. Father said, get that out of here. We're talking about the most important will of God. Having lunch with Mother is very different, actually. When food comes, the meeting is over. Yeah, Mother says, that food, somebody worked hard to prepare it, and if you don't eat it hot, it won't taste good. So let's enjoy the food together. We'll have the meeting afterwards. I mean, that never happened with Father. One time we were having lunch, and we had our soup, which was pumpkin, and the next dish was steak. But it was covered with a sauce that looked like radioactive pond slime. I mean, it was vibrant green and glowing, and Mother must have looked up and seen us kind of poking this stuff around our plate. She said, look, I know it looks disgusting, so I want you to close your eyes cut a bite and eat it and tell me if it isn't really delicious. So, of course, I remember my mom used to tell me to do that. Close your eyes and eat that food. So we did it. So mother is very different from father. Yeah, she cares about food. She cares about mealtime. She cares that people have a healthy life. She was constantly telling me not to drink so much coffee, to lose weight, and other things that my wife would love to hear. Luckily, she's not there to hear it. So anyway, what was I saying? Oh, yes. Mother had the kind of faith that carried her through. She said living with father was a bit like living with a nuclear reactor in your kitchen. There's a lot of power and energy. It's surging all over the place. But there's fallout as well, because you're right close to the source. But somehow we have to be like that, right? We're created actually to live in personal association with God, the source of the energy that created the universe. You can't do that and retain within you impurities or doubts or faithlessness. To survive, you have to let it go. You have to let it go and let God take over. And I really feel mother could do that. Father could do that. And we have to do it too. And there's a part of me, that likes to keep a little bit of distance. I like to kind of keep my options open. It's like you're driving down the highway. You like to know where the next exit is, right? Just in case. But in fact, to build God's kingdom means going past the last exit of the fallen world. It means making a commitment, we're going to go to the end. We're not looking anymore to kind of turn off and give it up and let other people do the work. We got to go past the last exit and keep going until we build that kingdom. And it doesn't have to be, 50, 100 years from now. Mother is convinced. It can be soon. Why not? God has been waiting all these thousands of years. Do we have to think that just because Father's ascended and we have some problems in our movement, does that disqualify God, the creator of the universe, the creator of 4 trillion-year-old stars or lifetime stars, from working? No. God has always and only been waiting for people to stand up and say, count on me, Lord. I'm here till the end. And I think that's the kind of faith that we can have, but we can only have it together. You'll never do it if it's just you by yourself. But as a community, and as communities, we need to kind of bind together and commit. We are in this till the end. We're going to get this job done. In Mother's speech, which you saw in the American version, almost the last thing she said was, I want you to restore your states. So here I am in North Carolina, asking you to think, what is our plan to restore this state? What does that look like? I mean, we've already got some keys from what Mother did. Well, first of all, we have to work with the elected officials, the people who are in public office. Luckily, we got a good start. We had a great turnout from North Carolina in Washington, from the congressional delegation. It was fantastic. So we're off to a good start. But also we need to work with the ministers, to the point where they themselves become the champions of blessing and giving marriage revival to their congregations and to all the people of this state. Your Mother said many times, and Father before, every American state is like a country in the rest of the world. So, as the residents of North Carolina, I can tell you for sure, Mother's expectation is you'll come up with a plan to move the needle in North Carolina by 2020. What a restoration of a state. I don't think that we can do that by our own power. According to the principle, we have 5% responsibility and God has 95%. But the principle also says that our 5% takes 100% of our effort. But you know what? If you do 100% of your effort and you lose sight of the fact that it's only 5% of the whole thing, you get burned out. You think, this is impossible. I'm not strong enough. And that's true. But God can do it. I think there is a way to catch up on all those years. In her Mother's speech, she said, 40 years have gone by since True Parents came to America. If we'd have had the Dan Burtons or the John Doolittles and these Congress figures who've accepted the principle become blessed, if we'd have had the George Stallings of these ministers of great faith 40 years ago, perhaps we'd be in a different place today. We didn't, okay, it's done. But we got them now. We have an opportunity to stand up. So in the book of Joel, it talks about the locust years. It says God will give back the years that the locusts have eaten. I mean, that was at a time when the crops of Israel were being destroyed year after year by locusts, grasshoppers, whatever, from Egypt. And it looked like, you know, nothing would ever flourish and glow and blossom again. There'd never be another harvest. But God promised, not only will there be that harvest, but also everything you thought you'd lost is going to come back, and more. That's why you see Mother reviving things like ICOS and the International Peace Highway, and projects that we knew Father had started, but somehow got left behind, and we thought maybe that's done, you know, that was just lost. But not so. You know, some of these projects are coming back. Now, you're not in New York, and you're not in Washington, and I know you didn't have the chance to come and be with True Mother this time, but don't worry, because I want to charge you. North Carolina's in a good position. You know, if you think about the type of countries that Father and Mother were always interested, it was countries that are not too big and not too small, you know, that have a lot of natural assets and good education, all the things. North Carolina, why not think this could be the first state in America to be restored? What does that really look like? I think we have to think about it. You know, what would we like the governor to do? What would we like the Congress? What would the schools teach? How would we create an alliance of churches? If we think about what we've accomplished before, we can do it maybe. But if we think that those 8.5 years of drought for Father, for example, are over, and this is the time when God is going to press play, and his plan of restoration is going to unfold, this can be an amazing time. But even if it's not, wouldn't you rather go out swinging than looking? You know, you don't want to strike out looking, right? If the balls fly past, and at least you want to swing. And I think Mother's encouraging us to do that. Guys, you have a chance. It's possible to win this thing. I have confidence. Mother has confidence. And each of the states in America should think we can make it. We can make it. We can make a big difference by 2020. Do I have the formula? No. Do I have a strategic plan? Not really, but I know what the key elements are. It's something that we could do together. But in the end, remember, faith is about things that you can't see. If you could see it, if you could see everything, if you knew every possibility and you kind of had guarantees, you know, it wouldn't be faith anymore. Faith is belief in things that can't be seen but can be felt, and a willingness to be the one who makes the difference to make it happen. So with that, let us pray. Our loving Heavenly Parent, thinking again about those disciples on the boat. They knew Jesus. They lived with him. They'd seen him work miracles. They'd also seen him in dark times when the answer was not clear. They knew he was never going to abandon them, and that he loved you more than anything else. But when it came down to it, they couldn't step out of the boat. They couldn't step out of the zone of safety, even though it wasn't that safe, and take a risk everything approach. But if they had, then history would have been so different. A few months later, when Jesus was about to be crucified, if they could have stood together, history would have taken a different course, but they couldn't. Today, we're with the living true parents on earth. We're being called to step out of our boats, to leave behind the things that are comfortable, safe, and known, and take a gamble, a risk, and invest everything we have to the vision of building your kingdom. You've been waiting it for since time immemorial. It doesn't have to be the case that we'll wait for centuries to come. It can happen in our lifetime. And I pray for this community here in North Carolina that you will show to them the way to restore this state, to give it a new lease on life, that the years of famine can be over and the harvest of grace can be. And please bless each family, each community, each home. Father, let your spirit and the spirit of our living true parents fill all of us. We thank you, and we offer our prayers together. I report in the name of Mike and Fumiko Balcom and all your blessed sons and daughters of Blessed Central families here. Adieu.